hear me well? Yeah, cool. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And I will just dive right into it. Because I have a lot of interesting thoughts about the future. But in particular, coming from my favorite philosophers, Calvin and Hobbes, they observed that the problem with the future is it keeps turning back into the present. And I think it's a playful reminder of how quickly tomorrow becomes today, but it's also a friendly reminder of how easily we can get disillusioned, with the future, with our expectations. So Happy New Year. Well, a similar sentiment, I think, is shared by another wise character from a galaxy far away, who said that always in motion is the future. And I think us content folks especially can relate to this in the sense of, so many changes happening in the content landscape. But I think he's alluding to something else here, to the fact that amidst uncertainty and amidst adversity, we have the opportunity to turn that into our advantage. And that kind of sets the stage for, kind of made me think of, what I'm thinking of, in terms of future of content, which is that the future of content will always be about things far bigger than content itself. We know that there are profound changes happening now in the way we create and organize and manage content, data, and knowledge. And technology is changing so rapidly. All systems are touching content, right? And content is becoming increasingly complex, even more complex than ever. And people's demand for personalized, localized, reliable, relevant, trustworthy content is surging, especially amidst the rise of AI influences and immersive experiences. And so the need for integrity in data and in content is paramount. And on the one hand, also, brands still need and must strive to forge meaningful relationships with audiences, manage content effectively and sustainably in a way that gives us competitive edge. Easy peasy, right? But that kind of sets the stage for what I wanted to talk about today, which is modeling content means choreographing change. And these are my personal reflections on how I think the work that's needed to be done when we want to connect content and we want to go omnichannel, how that is benefited by looking at it as a change movement. And I think this is the way that we can build resilience in content so that it can meet the demands of omnichannel, but also the demands of the future, which is changing and which is happening right now. So I'm Timi, and I'm a Principal Content Strategist at IKEA's Content Center for Expertise. And we're composed of content strategists, content designers, and UX writers. And if I had known that I can go, that I have some time, then I would have put my game character here, my game avatar, and would have made references to BTS, but I'm not going that direction. My favorite content, my content motto is that content begins and ends with people, and it rises and falls with relationships. And I think that ties in very nicely with IKEA's mission of creating better everyday lives for the many people. How might we serve relevant content that really helps people? And how might we do that in a sustainable fashion? That's what keeps our team busy, our many teams who are trying to crack the challenge of omnichannel content. And that is, I think, that's the core of this challenge. How can we create content once, repurpose it everywhere, and how do we structure content in a way that it will move and flow, ready to go and meet the many people in their chosen context? Because that's what omnichannel is about. Being able to provide this in a sustainable way, in a way that's not just about the technological solutions, but also us as creators of content and those who will benefit from this. How do we provide that? And my reflections are about The perspectives that I have developed along with my team as we went along and tried to solve this quest. We're still in this quest. We're still in this journey. And there's some perspectives that are helping, personally, are helping me to understand what is this work that we're doing and how do we communicate it. And those are the things that I want to talk about today. Number one, stating the very obvious, but maybe still not obvious to many, is that just like unconnected data, unconnected content is a liability. Connected content is an asset. And with the demands of omnichannel and with how technology is changing right now, content is inseparable from data and knowledge. And the work that needs to be done is huge, is complex, and therefore, when we want to model content, to make it ready for omnichannel, to make it ready for AI, for machines, for the future, we need to consider it within a culture of change. So those are the three things that I'd like to talk to you about today. Beginning with the first one, which is unconnected content is a liability. Because if we want to go omnichannel, it's impossible to do it with unconnected content. So what's unconnected content? Let's flip it, and let's talk about what content needs to connect to in order to deliver value and to be relevant. It needs to connect to different users, context, needs, intents, challenges, purchase, history, different phases in the user journey, different channels, different devices, the products, attributes, other content, different knowledge sources, different consuming and delivery systems, and the product teams, the teams that all work within and to create and develop these products. And all the relevance in content and all those connections must also scale. So I'm not going to lie, this is keeping our teams very busy, right? And so how are we going to connect content? We need to connect it with what Chip was saying earlier. We need structures. We need semantics or meaning, enrich it with logic. We need to have the right structures in place. But before we do that, it's important to acknowledge that content is inseparable from data and knowledge. And I think there's no real value to be met now if you try to, we can debate and say, well, content is not really data or it's not really knowledge. I think there's more value to be gained if you start thinking of content as something that is crucial for data and vice versa, and as well as knowledge. Especially in omnichannel, and especially if you want to go down the path of personalization. So data provides facts to content, knowledge provides context, and in that merging, that synergy, you get more of the kind of content that can address the different contexts of users. There are two conditions that we see that meets how you can get to connected content. In general, when we say omnichannel, right, you wanna provide content that is coherent and cohesive and audience-centric and cuts across channels in order to deliver value that exceeds the impact of any single channel, right? And to do that, we need to have content that can adapt consistently from one experience to another. And this is why we need to treat content like data. Identify those concepts and relationships, like in a knowledge graph, for example, and the attributes. And then also, we need to find a way to make content flow efficiently from one system to another. And this is where structures and standards come in, standards that enrich content with meaning and logic, taxonomies, for example, so that the systems can basically understand what am I supposed to do with this content and how can I make magic out of this content. To communicate that change and that big change, we found it very useful to start showing and explaining to people like what is content made of. And we started using the content stack, and it's something that for those who are familiar with the book Connected Content by Mike Atherton and Carrie Hain, so they introduced the content stack. And we've done it to serve more our purposes for communicating how content should be developed, what to look for, what platforms and systems and processes to look for, and especially surfacing the need for taxonomies, for that knowledge part, the one that will create the relationships. And this is our rallying call when it comes to connected content, that we need to structure content like data, model it like knowledge, and iterate and govern it like a product and service. It's not just one thing that you publish at the end, of a calendar. It's more than that. And this foundations part of the modeling, giving the structure, that's our strategic focus for our team. And we also do a lot of work on the other stuff, the content itself, how it's presented, how to navigate. I mean, it takes a community to raise a child, and it takes a community to raise our content baby, basically. And we're focusing on the foundations part. I'm not going to talk about the modeling part, but I want to show how can you communicate this? Like when you talk about models, content models, domain models, what are these things? And going to omnichannel means being able to get the content structure right. And so if you're looking at creating content and thinking, how is this going to be experienced? How is this going to be delivered? You think already of structure at the beginning. So pretty much like thinking of Lego, you have to build it in a modular way. It has to be connected at some point. So you take those things in account. And that gives you flexibility later on how you want to present content and how you can reuse it and how it's going to scale. Of course, imagine if you use clay for this. You can still handcraft the final output, but if you want to disassemble and remix and repurpose, then for the parents among us, as my friend Sarah mentioned, you will get this kind of result, right? That's not the kind of content we want, I think. So getting the structure right is important. Getting the meaning right is also important. Getting the semantics in. And so for this, say you want to create content that's about plant and flowers. All right, how is that connected to home decor? What is the mental model of your users? What do they understand of this kind of object, of this kind of thing in the real world? Because that's what your relationships will be built on when we talk about content. And when we say connecting concepts and relationships, it's about understanding how it operates in the real world. And for this is where knowledge domain modeling comes in, which is a great way, a visual way to show how concepts are related and how they work in the real world. Because this map, this structure, you can take this and you can apply it to a web page. You can apply it to an app. That logic that's built in here. And that's where consistency comes in. And that also forms the language, the common language that you can use with your teams and in the way you create content, and later on even in code, because this is your input for ontologies and taxonomies and metadata. Instead of just starting from the end metadata, how is it categorized into the bigger concepts? So being great in omnichannel, I think, is being great in terms of concepts. So you have meaning, structure, and also the need to make sure that you're creating the meaning and the structure in the right standards for content to be really omnichannel ready and machine processing friendly. That's what being future friendly is all about. So easy peasy, right? No, of course not. And this is why we say, and I'm saying that modeling content, the lessons that we're seeing is that you need to be comfortable in change, and there needs to be processes around how you're going to transition into this. So modeling content thrives in a culture of change. We need to be deliberate in the way we align and we adopt all the changes that we need for this to happen, for this to succeed. So while changing content is one big job, you can also think of what are the components of change that will help me, help you, help your teams do this kind of work. This is something, something that just on a personal note, something that I thought, this could help me actually in my role to understand the work and how to communicate it. And it's very helpful to try to find a framework that helps you manage the change. For me, it was human-centric design and systems thinking. And that is also actually value of IKEA, which is value-driven, people first, human-centric technology. So it, again, ties in very nicely with our bigger goal, because that's also one of the key things, is to make sure that you can match what is it that we're trying to change in content, what is it serving, what's the higher purpose. So always bringing it back to the vision, and who are the people, the teams, the ones who will benefit from this change. And because this is a big change, because content modeling, structuring content is basically going against the more dominant forms of content development. Then there will be a lot of friction, a lot of challenges. So there must be a way for us to be able to find a leverage point. What is it that you want to change? Something visible, tangible, that you can share and collaborate with. And that's what I call the design levers, the narratives of change. How are you going to talk about this change? What language are you going to use? And also the artifacts that you need to use, the tools or processes to communicate this. And also think about ourselves. What is it that's motivating you to keep on doing this work? Because this work is not going to happen overnight. It takes a lot of patience, and you need to tap into yourself, like what's the proper mindset for knowing how to work with change, but also how can you relate this to what you're passionate about? For me, it's games and education. So a lot of the concepts in games and education I find very applicable to the way we're creating our strategies. So some example. So this is, if you want to know more about human-centered systems thinking, IDEO offers a course on this. I mean, there's also a lot of other sources. I like the way that they've combined human-centric design and systems thinking. And it has a lot of parallels to the work that we want to do with the structuring content. So let's just go, and I'll give some examples of those layers and the components of change. When we talk of creating beacons of change, you have the levers of design, which is basically finding out what's your system challenge, what is it you're trying to change. And why am I bringing up systems here? Because content is a system, right? And that's why it's so hard to change. It's not just something that we will edit later and then it's all going to be okay. It's what we use mostly in our teams. It's like a bowl of spaghetti. Once you try unraveling it, then it just opens up and connects to all the other issues. So finding a leverage point, understanding what your challenge is, and finding that point that you want to change, and how to activate it using the levers of design. And I'll talk about it in a bit. And by design, I mean not just the visual or aesthetics of something, but the creative problem solving. Yeah. How will you frame the change? How do you communicate it? And to whom you communicate it with? And how will you learn in this process? And how will you gain confidence? So what are these actions that will inspire, invite collaboration, and will keep you moving forward? A very simple way to do this, probably a lot of you do this already, is to ask how might we questions. If in trying to understand what's the change that I'm trying to drive, if you start asking how might we, instead of how can I, or what is the solution, that is a different way of framing the possibilities that you can come up with. How might we questions is very good with getting you into that mindset of thinking of generating lots of possibilities first, and then you can do a lot more of choosing what to experiment with, what to prototype, etc. For example, and this can be, it's all dependent on your context, of course. How might we leverage the interest in AI to shine the spotlight on structured content? Instead of saying that maybe others would think, oh, AI will replace the need to work on structured content. We can pose it in a different way, so you can actually leverage from that interest. Or instead of just looking at how I'm going to content model, how I'm going to convince someone that this is the right thing to do, if you think of how will you generate excitement or curiosity in the modeling, then it kind of changes the way you want to answer this question. Activating the levers for design. The common levers for design are around strategy, structures, process. Just an example on the process side, thinking of how can you use the language of your organization in the way they're creating goals. How can you use the same language to communicate the kind of change that you want. It can be an OKRs level. If you're working in the non-government organization, the theory of change, something you can maybe Google, but it's about knowing exactly what is the change you're bringing to a community, for example, and what are the steps that you need to take, and you have to go backwards until the very beginning to make sure that you are capturing this change. So finding a way to blend different types and means in order to solve the problems. And then there's a lot more, but we're not going to go into that. Visualizing the system. use network maps to understand connections between stakeholders and teams. Use process maps to identify those moments that matter where you can identify unique value or create efficiencies. And problem maps if you want to really look and analyze the root cause of a problem. Very simple ways to try to humanize this system and make better understanding of what you need to change in content. Another one would be how to frame the change. So think of who will benefit from this change versus who's driving it. Maybe a lot of us here are ones driving the change, for example. How do we align what we think should change with the needs of those that we want to work with? So imagine that if you have enthusiastic change drivers versus those who are kind of indifferent, and then you have your beneficiaries or the ones who want change. If they are enthusiastic and also they believe, okay, I'm convinced. You don't even have to frame a message, I think. Go just plan the work. Do that right away. Whereas if you might be enthusiastic, we want to do structured content, but if the ones that you need to work with don't care or don't understand it yet, then you need to go back and think of a good rallying cry. If they don't really care, if none of you cares, then maybe go back to the drawing board, or maybe this is not the thing you should be prioritizing in the first place. Put your energy into something else. Now, these kinds of things are the common topics that you would get if you look into systems thinking and human-centered design. All right, almost there. The last part would be how do we create confidence? How do we learn? So this is where prototypes come in, explorations come in. When you try to understand what you want to change, find a partner, find a power duo, for example, not just by yourself, because the smallest unit of change in that organization would be a duo. And so go and find that soulmate. And as our founder have said, no method is more effective than a good example. So again, try to find what kind of examples work for what kind of audience. The very last thing was just something around leadership. It was something that was cutting across all the layers. And I think, as this is a change movement, and you need to consider how are you framing the way you're leading, bring out the inner leader in you. This could be many things, but I'm just focusing right now. My favorite word right now is resilience. And I just learned that resilience comes from a word that means jump back, or also the root word to leap. So for me, that means resilient systems, organization, individuals can jump back or jump ahead. I really like that. And another friend of mine said, they can also jump sideways. That's also resilience. Just shout out to Stobe Boyd I saw this in his newsletter, and that really got me thinking. And so with this change that we want to do with content, it would be great, if you start thinking how we have this acceptance of uncertainty, use it as a tool against adversity, and think of that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. That's what Rebecca Solnit said, but also what Yoda said. And that's our way to try, to gain confidence and go into the future. And that's all, folks. Thank you very much.